class. About a few weeks ago, a player was allegedly disqualified for cheating at one of the biggest events this year. Crazy! And this really isn't an outlier. I've witnessed a countless number of times on stream and in person where players unintentionally and intentionally cheat. My biggest fear is that this could happen to you and it could cost you at your biggest moment. So in today's video, big dogs, I'm going to be breaking down some of the most common ways that players will try to intentionally and unintentionally cheat, because it does happen very often. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all, big dogs? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Cheating in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the most controversial things that happens. And it's mainly because, like I said earlier, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so complex, sometimes players can intentionally cheat, meaning that they are actually meaning to cheat you, and unintentionally cheat, meaning that sometimes they may forget how card effects work, they may not have read the card correctly themselves, and just about anything in between. Now, one quick advice that I want to point out to my students that are going to Station events is that it doesn't matter if it's unintentional or intentional. Konami still will ban you. And to be honest with you guys, how Konami works, they really don't need proof. They ban Yu-Gi-Oh! Players just over hearsay, so take cheating incredibly serious. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down 3 different stages where you can identify the possibility of being cheated. There's the before the event or the gameplay takes place, during gameplay, and after gameplay, and all 3 phases are incredibly important. And I'm not 100% sure if I will catch some of the most common ways that players cheat. So if you guys have even more ways, go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section too. This video might be deserving of a part 2. But let's go ahead and jump on in and start off by the beginning phases. I think that it's really important as Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that you guys understand the event that you're going to. If you guys are playing inside of your friend group, there are some things that are a little bit more acceptable within that friend group than if you were playing at a sanctioned tournament. Like, for example, oftentimes players will play with illegal cards, whether they're cards that haven't been released yet, proxy cards, or even fake Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. I want you guys to understand that when you're playing in that type of setting, those are the things that typically happens. Let it go. I want to point out that those are the times that it's a lot more acceptable to be using those cards. But when you get to a sanctioned event like a locals level event and higher, it is absolutely a no-go. A lot of people don't know this, but this is one of those things that actually could get you in trouble. Just like how at a local level event, things like slow playing are normally not enforced. And that's something that you completely cannot take to a big event like a regionals or YCS and above. And this part is so important because it goes both ways. While you should understand the rules that are happening, you also need to be mindful of the rules that you can enforce. Trying to get your buddies disciplined for slow playing in casual Yu-Gi-Oh! Just like trying to enforce deck lists at local level events is you trying just a little too hard. It's not something that should happen, but if you're the player that is enforcing this at every step of the way, players are going to start calling you a rule shark. And especially if you're doing it when you're wrong, that is a form of cheating. It's trying to abuse the system to get some wins. So again, guys, really important that you understand the type of event that you're going to and the rules that will be enforced. Now for those big tournament events that require deck list and above, all of these rules apply. The first thing that you should do when playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Is make sure that the game state is represented correctly at all times. Game state means that the cards are being placed in their correct spots, cards are being used in the correct way, and things are being visually seen all in the same manner. Like, for example, when you very first sit across from your opponent and start bringing out your accessories, make sure 100% to bring out your extra deck and your side deck and place them on the table alongside of your main deck. You won't believe how many Yu-Gi-Oh! Players actually cheat by having extra cards inside of their deck box. It is completely illegal for these type of events. Now, some players may only bring their main deck outside of their deck box, and that's perfectly fine if they tell you the contents of their extra deck and their side deck are in the deck box. This is called declaring. And if you guys are suspicious, you can count the number of cards in your opponent's extra deck and side deck face down. You can ask politely by like, hey, how many cards in extra deck and side deck, and then ask to count them face down. Now, it's incredibly important to be mindful and respectful to your opponent, so when you're communicating them, make sure you are in the correct manner. Now, it is 100% fine to be firm, and if you find something that goes against the rules, immediately contact the judge. But now let's get to the part that potentially got somebody banned: shuffling.
Every day I'm shuffling.
So class, it almost feels like a lost art when it comes to shuffling and how to present your deck. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it has been a little concerning because I've noticed that players have been shuffling their deck a lot different. I have been seeing players shuffle their deck like this, which is, I don't know, that's them looking at their deck as they shuffle. I don't know if they think that their cards are gonna fall out or something, but that's absolutely a no-go. The correct way to shuffle your deck and how your opponent should be shuffling their deck is away from their body and eyes. If you see a Yu-Gi-Oh player shuffling their deck or your deck like this, politely ask them to look away when shuffling. This can either be done like this, or it can be done like this. I prefer like this because as your opponent is shuffling your deck, you can make direct eye contact at them and make sure that they're not stacking their Yu-Gi-Oh deck. And by the way, if you ever wondered how these sleeves, so lovely and so nice, they're actually about 2 months old. These are Raven Wing sleeves that you can buy on TheCaliEffect.com. Raven Wing sleeves are easily the #1 sleeve in Yu-Gi-Oh! And they just so happen to be the cheapest. So if you guys want to support the best channel in the world and also get something in return, you can go to TheCaliEffect.com and pick up your Raven Wing sleeves today because they're phenomenal. Now, another way that players can unintentionally and intentionally cheat is not remembering mandatory Yu-Gi-Oh! Effects. A mandatory Yu-Gi-Oh! Card effect is a card effect that must happen. Take, for example, SP Little Knight's effect to return the monsters back to the side of the field after it's banished 2 cards, or one of the Mole Charmy monsters effects to shuffle cards back into your deck because you have over 6 cards than the opponent has on the field. Sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh! Players can intentionally forget to get an advantage, and other times Yu-Gi-Oh! Players just straight up forget. The downside about this is that both you and your opponent are 100% responsible for these effects. So yes, you can get in trouble for your opponent forgetting. The best way to avoid this is to actually declare card effects out loud. This information is so ridiculously helpful, we actually used to do this in football. After the QB comes in and tells us to play, we would all say it out loud so we would know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how we are doing it. It's very powerful. This isn't 100% foolproof, but it helps you and your opponent remember 1000%. Like for example, if I'm summoning Bestial Magnemite and I'm using its effect, I will declare out loud, I am activating the effect of Bestial Magnemite to add a dragon monster to my hand during the end phase. And there have been times where I'm about to forget, but I remembered it, or my opponent does, because I said it out loud. I'm telling you, big dogs, it does seem a little bit goofy at first, but it's actually how we remember so much that's happening in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Challenge. When we're actually saying what the things you're doing, it's something that clicks in your brain to be able to retain that information. So please, please, for the love of God, if you guys want to be better at this game, start saying what the card effects do. This also ties into another thing that a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player will do, which could also be seen as intentionally or unintentionally cheating. Lying about Yu-Gi-Oh! Effects. Now, you'd probably think that there is no way you can unintentionally cheat by lying about Yu-Gi-Oh! Effects, but seeing that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players don't read and Yu-Gi-Oh! Card text can be confusing at times, there can be some slip-ups. This is especially true considering that different monster effects can be worded very similarly, and sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh! Card effects do change and players may not be aware of it. Erratas happen all the time. I think a really good example of this was Promethean Princess when that card first came out. This card says you can only special summon fire monsters when this card is on the field. And quite a few Yu-Gi-Oh! Players actually mistook this card for you can only special summon fire monsters for the duration of the turn. They also thought that if this card effect was negated, you were still locked into only summoning fire monsters. And my first time playing against this card, I was one of those Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that thought that. So going back to what I said previously, it really does help to say what the cards do, but it's also really important that if you don't know what your opponent's card does, you ask some questions to get clarification. Ask if it's that particular card's effect that can be used once per turn, or if it's the card's name that can only be used once per turn. There's a huge difference between the two. Ask what type of card effect is it? Is it an ignition effect, a trigger effect, a quick effect, a continuous, anything like that? And also be sure to ask what are the requirements to use this card. A lot of times from what I've observed, if a player is intentionally trying to cheat, they'll be forced to play the card correctly because now that information is out. Because if they intentionally try to play the card wrong after knowing what the card does, then that's something that can be a big problem for them. And don't always take your opponent's word as law. If you are unsure about a card effect, make sure to read the card. Yu-Gi-Oh players actually get a terrible rep for not reading Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but in actuality, Yu-Gi-Oh players look for the wrong things. The first things that you should look for a Yu-Gi-Oh card are those things that I just mentioned. Is it a hard once per turn, soft once per turn, what type of effect it is, and what are the requirements? From there, you go into details about the effect to be able to piece the card together. This way of reading Yu-Gi-Oh cards has helped me tremendously, especially considering that most Yu-Gi-Oh archetypes follow a certain theme. It's how the best players in the game can easily pick up on cards that they've never seen before and diagnose the card's weaknesses. But my best overall advice to you is that it is in your best interest to read cards beforehand. A lot of Yu-Gi-Oh cards will appear to you over and over again throughout a tournament, and it's pretty important that you know what those cards are beforehand so you're not taking up too much time. And speaking of time, there are players that will try to use that. Players that will try to intentionally waste time so they can win the game because they have more life points. And this is actually a pretty simple thing to work with. All you have to do is be kind but firm. First, the most important thing is that every Yu-Gi-Oh community has those type of slow players. What I do when I'm playing against a player that I think is slow playing, I ask them if they're thinking right now when they take a little bit too much time. After they say yes, the first thing I do is fan out my graveyard and tell them how many cards I have in hand. From there, it genuinely goes from a case-by-case basis and based on how many actionable moves there are. If there's no actionable moves they can do, then tell them, hey boss, you know the cards I have in my hand in my graveyard? I don't think you have any actionable moves. Can we proceed to the next phase? And if they do have actionable moves, encourage them to perform an action. Hey man, I don't mean to be a bother. It's been a little bit and you haven't made an action. We got to keep this game going at a steady pace. Remember, always calm but firm, letting them know that there's a lot of options that can be made, but Yu-Gi-Oh needs to be done in the timely manner. If you have to constantly ask your opponent to remain at an even pace, then consider calling a judge this time around. Now, I want to point out that calling a judge for this particular situation is a pretty serious matter, so it's really important that you exhaust all of your resources by making the game as easy as possible for them to make the next move, and by also politely encouraging them to play at an even pace. After you've done this quite a few times, oftentimes players beside you would also even notice, so when a judge does come around, you actually have a case. I can tell you I've never had to evolve a judge for slow playing, but I have had to use this particular strategy to keep them on an even pace. And another thing to note is that for regional levels and below, if your judge staff is familiar with your area, they know who those slow players are. Those particular players develop a reputation, and it's normally not a good one. Now, we went on before the games and during the games. The last part of this video is after your games, and this is where a lot of people mess up. It is incredibly important to never tell people what you are playing or spreading information in between rounds. One of the biggest ways that players soft cheat is by conveying information of deck lists between rounds. Oftentimes, they'll have players scout your information to give the information to your opponent so they have a clear advantage. This ironically happened to me in my first Yu-Gi-Oh tournament, and is the reason why I got second place. I'm still salty over it. And another time it happened, I actually got top 8 instead of first place because I blabbermouthed information. Big dogs, I know you guys are excited about your games, but telling everybody the cards that you play, the things that you do, and the text that you have made is normally not a good idea. It's almost the exact same thing as going out into the football field and telling them the formation and the play you are going to do. Now, I've done that, but that's just because I'm a cold motherfucker. But it's not normally the recommended thing you should do. And that is all that I have for today's video. Just some tips to keep you from being cheated in your Yu-Gi-Oh games. Now, personally, I'm all out of ideas for ways that players can cheat, but I know you guys are thinking of some big ones right now. And if you guys want to see a part 2 of this video, go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section. I can't wait to see what you have to say. But until then, class, you already know your homework. Make sure to get those Raven Wing sleeves, and also make sure to check out these other videos so I can catch you on the next one.